Hi everybody! Today we're going to be looking at Verkleinwoorde, which are diminutives. Essentially, they're words that mean small things. They're the small versions of words. When we make words into plurals in Afrikaans, we generally add "ie", but depending on how the word ends, that might change a little bit. When it comes to Verkleinwoorde, generally we add "ie", but it's a little bit more complicated than that, because quite often there's stuff in front of the "ie". But the general rule is, if you want to make something small, add "ie". You'll need to remember that as with adding the kiss and catcher "ie", "ie" and etjie make the words behave the same way. Adding them makes short vowel sounds longer. And if we don't adequately protect vowels that are already short, or shorten long vowels, we're going to end up with problems. We'll start with the first of the two kiss and catcher endings, "ie". It applies to three different groups of words. The first group is words that end in a single vowel that's followed by either G, K, P, or S. The second group is words that end in twin or double vowels that are followed by one consonant. So remember that twin vowels are vowels that are identical, and double vowels are just two vowels that are not necessarily the same. This doesn't apply to words that end in D, M, N, or T, which basically spells out "don't meet". The reason we don't do this is D and T are covered by another ending, and M and N have very special rules that apply to them. The third group is words that end with a double consonant, except where the last letter again is D, M, or NT, which again spells out "don't meet". What I want you to remember is "don't meet injured elephants". So for words that end in D, N, M, or T, you don't want to use injured elephants, "ie", for the end of the word. For the first group, I've chosen the words lig, dak, kop, and kas. So light, roof, head or hill, and cupboard. And because all of these are short vowels, if we just add "ie" straight onto the end of it, it's going to lengthen the vowels. And lighie and darkie and koopie and kasi are not going to sound right. They don't sound like their original words. So for each of them, we're going to need to double the final consonant. Okay, so for lig we add another G, for dak we add another K, for kop we add another P, and for kas we add another S. So that we end up with double consonants just before the "ie". After we've doubled the consonant, we can add the "ie". For the second group that ends in twin or double vowels that are followed by one consonant, we end up with words like ape, neef, cousin or nephew, neus, nose, huis, and house. For the words that have the twin vowels, remember that one is scared of "e", so he hides behind the other and he runs away, and then when we add the "ie", we just have one vowel that's standing up to be kissed by this "ie". So aap becomes aapie and neef becomes neefie. For neus and huis, because they're not the same vowels, they don't get jealous and they don't get scared and they don't run away and they don't hide, and they don't sound different when you add "ie" to the end of them. So neus becomes neusie and huis becomes huisie. For the third group, they're words that end with a double consonant, again except D, M, N, or T. So you get words like vark and dorp, pig and town. So vark, just add "ie" becomes varkie, and dorp, just add "ie" becomes dorpie. So the kissing only applies where it's a twin vowel or a single vowel. So now we can say that we've crossed "ie" off our list, and we're now going to move to etjie. Etjie, as it's more commonly referred to, has only two groups that it applies to. The first group is a one-syllable word that ends with ng, like slang or ring. Do you hear that you can't separate the word into two different syllables? Syllables are generally what your English teacher will say you can separate with claps. So slang is only one clap and ring is only rung, just like that. The other group is words that end in a short vowel that are followed by L, M, N, or R, which I think spells out lemona. And I assume that there's a person in the world who is so etchy or itchy that he's had to become a lemona and squeeze lemons all over his skin all day so he doesn't get itchy. And it's made him smaller. So we have words like bal, lam, man, and kar. Now remember, because this is a short vowel and we're adding something that starts with a vowel, it's going to have the kissing catcher effect again. So for bal, we're going to have to add another consonant to protect this little vowel from getting kissed. Lam, add another M to protect the vowel from getting kissed. Man, add another N to protect this vowel from getting kissed. Kar, add another R to protect this vowel from getting kissed. So we have balaki, lamaki, manaki, karretjie. Double the consonant and add etjie. Here, because it ends in a double consonant already, this vowel in the middle is already protected. So we can just go ahead and add etjie straight away. Slang, slangaki, rung, rungaki. So that's us done with ie and etjie. We're now going to move on to tjie and see how that works. Before we do move on to tjie though, all the following sounds, jie, tjie, apostrophe tjie, and pie, as well as ki, you don't have to double any consonants because there are no vowels at the beginning of this. You also don't have to drop any vowels. For kie though, you are going to have to drop the g to put the kie in because g next to kie just doesn't work. You can't put a g next to a k. Start with jie. Jie has always tried to be tjie. He's like his little brother and he's desperately trying to be grown up to be like tjie. So he's very picky about who he tags onto. And he tags onto T or he tags onto D because D is quite similar to T in the Afrikaans language. Or at least he sees it that way. So he will join onto a word that ends in T or D no matter what vowel sound or consonants go before it. So cut, which has a single vowel, foot, which has the double but not twin vowel, and procent, which has a double consonant at the end. It'll also go on to hood, which has the double but not twin vowel, hond, double consonant, and putloot, which has a double vowel. If I'd put a word here that ended in T and had a double vowel in it as well, it would also go on to that quite happily. So that's the first part of our don't meet that is now taking care of the D and the T. So cat becomes karretjie, foot becomes voetjie, procent becomes procentjie, hoed becomes hoetjie, hond becomes hondjie, potlood becomes potloodjie. We've dealt with ie, we've dealt with etjie, and we've dealt with jie. So now we're going to look at tjie, the sound that jie is so desperately trying to be. Tjie applies to three groups. It'll firstly apply to any words that end in double or twin vowel that's followed by n. So words like tuin and boen, garden or bean. Tuintjie, boentjie. Just add it straight on. The second group it'll apply to is words that again end in double or twin vowels followed by L or R, or a word that is two syllables and ends in L or R. I like to remember the L and the R by thinking of lovers, because there aren't very many Afrikaans words that end in V. Stoel ends in an R, L, tafel ends in an L, vloer ends in an R, and motor ends in an R. So we can straight away say that these are all lovers words. Okay? So now we're looking for double or twin vowels or two syllables. Stoel has double vowel, so we don't need to worry about excluding that. That can definitely have tjie added to it. Tafel has a short vowel. Now we need to check how many syllables it has. Tafel. That has two syllables, so that means we can definitely add tjie to that. So tafel becomes tafeltjie. Just add tjie straight to it. Vloer has the double vowel, so we can just add tjie straight away, vloertjie. Motor, we need to check the number of syllables. Motor. Do you see how it has the single vowel here? That's the indicator that says we need to check how many syllables it is. So motor will just become motortjie. In the last group that tjie applies to is words that end in ie but aren't already a diminutive. So, for example, meisie, which is the opposite of seun, doesn't necessarily indicate a small person. Young, yes, but not necessarily small. So meisie will become meisietjie. And do you see how that forms the etjie, even though all we've added is the tjie? Horlosie, horlosietjie. Vakansie, vakansietjie. So for all of the words that have these applicable endings, we just add tjie. We've covered ie, we've covered etjie, we've covered jie, and we've covered tjie. That just leaves us to cover apostrophe tjie, and then we've covered all the words that contain jie. Generally, if you're going to add an ending and it starts with an apostrophe, it's generally used to separate an emphasized vowel from the new ending. We saw this in Meervoud when we had to add apostrophe s to words like Mars. tjie is going to apply firstly to words that end in an emphasized vowel, again like Ma or Safari. But what is an emphasized vowel? In Safari, you don't really hear the R and the R as heavily as you hear the I at the end. Safari. And Ma, you could contrast to say Omar, because in Omar, the O has all of the emphasis. But in Ma, the R has all of the emphasis. So you can see that that is the end of the word and it has an emphasized vowel. And Safari, the I has the emphasized vowel. So we can just go ahead and add the apostrophe tjie. Now technically, the letter of the alphabet, when we say it like it ends in an emphasized vowel. So R of beer ends in sort of an ear sound, which is emphasized, which is why we're also going to add an apostrophe tjie to letters of the alphabet. There's only one exception to this rule, and that's for the letter F, which is F apostrophe IE. That means we've dealt with IE, etjie, jie, tjie, and apostrophe tjie. That's all of the jies dealt with. We're now left with P and Ki, and that's what we're going to deal with. Dealing with P first, or pi, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Pi is going to apply to words that end in M, okay? But they have to end in either a double or a twin vowel, or a double consonant, or at least be 2 syllables. So boom, for example, contains our twin vowel. Scallum ends in the double consonant, and breidegom is at least 2 syllables. Breidegom. A word that doesn't end in M will not ever get a PIE. So boom becomes boompie, scallum becomes scallumpie, and breidegom becomes breidegompie, which I think is very funny because I think it sounds like grumpy. So now we are just left to deal with ki. Ki goes on to words that have at least 2 syllables and end in ing. Koning, koning. Verskoning, verskoning. Now you might remember that I said earlier that when we add KIE we always drop the G. The reason being is that we can't have a G next to a KIE. It would look like this if we did. Koningi. And it ends up sounding quite funny. So that is just wrong. You can't do that. Okay? So what we do is we drop the G in koning and we drop the G in verskoning. Koningi, verskoningi. So that the sound isn't doubled in the middle. So now we've covered all of the versions of IE that can be added to a word to make it small. That of course brings us to all the exceptions. And the first exception is the important one, is plurals. If a word is given to you in its plural form and you're asked to make it a diminutive, you have to first take it back to its singular form and then make the singular form small and then add an S to it following Meervoud rules to make it a plural again. So how do we do this? Say for example you're given honde. You know that hond is the singular. So you take it back to its singular. Once you've got it to its singular, you know that because it ends in a D you add JIE. So you make it hoinkie. But that's just one hoinkie. You need many hoinkie. So you add an S following the Meervoud rules of a word that ends in IE, making it hoinkies, in the same way that you would make meisie, meisies, if you were just asked to make it Meervoud. So honde, when it's made small, becomes hoinkies. Then there are the random exceptions of blad becomes blaikie, gat becomes gaaitjie, nooi, nooientjie, pat, paitjie, spel, spelletjie, vat, vaitjie, and wa, waaientjie. So all of this is great, But if you can't tell if you're being asked to change a word into its diminutive, then you're going to have big problems. The way that they love to ask it is in a sentence form, where they put the words that they want you to change in brackets with a line next to them where you can write the answer. So, how do you know? If a word in brackets is preceded by anything that indicates small, such as oulike, miniature, small, vlak, kort, or klein, then you know the word in the brackets needs to be changed to the Verkleiningvorm. So hond will become hondjie. Excuse my handwriting. And paard will become paardjie. Because they both end in D, they both just follow the tjie rule. That brings us to the end of this video on Verkleining. I find Verkleining quite hard to study, but what I think is really important is that you re-watch this video and you start with a blank A3 piece of paper and put IE in the middle. And leave enough space to put its 3 rules around it. Then from it, draw off each of the other things, the etjie, jie, and then off each of those draw off their own rules, so that on one mind map you can see all of the endings and all of their rules. I really recommend that that's how you study this section. Good luck, and I hope you do really well on them.